The opinions and views expressed by individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of this network, their group, or other organization they may be involved with.
I'm looking at myself, reflections of my mind. It's just the kind of day to leave myself behind. So gently swaying through the fairyland of love. If you'll just come with me, you'll see the beauty of Tuesday evening news. Tuesday evening
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Psychedelic Reporter for this Tuesday, the 7th, episode 201, here on NOK Network, the video news podcast focused on psychedelic medicine being reported in mainstream media. Shout out to the guys at that ringer for Kirkland Lake, Ontario, for the awesome intro track, originally recorded by the Moody Blues, with some customized changes for our show. I am joined by my amazing joint host, Tara Simpson, along with the one and only Buffalo Fairies, who has chosen all of our stories for us. Hello, Tara.
Well, hello, hobbies, and hello, everyone. I'd like to take a minute to introduce Bufo. He's our Sonoran desert toad, or Colorado mud toad. Did you know he emits DMT from his skin? And while that sounds like good fun, park rangers would like to remind everyone, please don't lick the toads.
Don't lick the toads.
No. Sustainable.
Yeah. I'm buying time as my thing loads. So it was a really fun week. Oh, here it is. Okay, so our first story comes out of Texas. And speaking about toads, Texas at the DallasObserver.com, it doesn't say anything about toads, but Texas to lead fund its own psychedelic trials after drug industry bugs. Advocates like former Texas Governor Rick Perry say a plant-derived drug can treat PTSD and addiction. By Austin Wood.
Yeah, so Texas might be heading into the psychedelic business alone after failing to find a drug company to partner with on clinical trials. State lawmakers approved $50 million in funding for clinical trials with ibogaine, a psychoactive drug derived from the shrub native to Central Africa, with the passage of Senate Bill 2308 in June. The bill's text calls for the creation of a consortium to conduct United States Food and Drug Administration's drug development clinical trials. While state funding was supposed to be matched by a drug company, no viable proposals have come forward. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Texas House of Representatives Speaker Dustin Burke announced last week. Instead, the state will fully fund a 2-year clinical trial, according to a joint statement from the two senior state Republicans. UT Health Houston, in collaboration with the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, has been tapped by the state's Health and Human Services Commission to lead the trials. Ibogaine is currently listed as a Schedule I drug by the Drug Enforcement Administration, despite its federal status and the Texas GOP's hardline stance on drug policy. Republican lawmakers have largely rallied to advocate for research into ibogaine's therapeutic potential, The drug has been used with some success in treating opioid addiction, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury. Texas is the home to more veterans than any other state. Texas Governor Greg Abbott wrote in a statement after SB 3808 or 2308 was signed into law. Many of those veterans suffered injuries, both seen and unseen. A therapy that has shown great promise in treating those conditions is ibogaine. This law authorizes a Food and Drug Administration approved clinical drug trial that will seek approval for ibogaine as a medication for the treatment of opioid use disorder and other behavioral health conditions. U.S. citizens, including former Texas Governor Rick Perry, have traveled to Mexico for years to take the drug to scale clinics and off the beaten path sweat lodges. In an interview with the New York Times, Perry said ibogaine therapy helped treat his anxiety and insomnia, leaving him happy as I've been in memory. Wow.
Not a short-time fix. The road to getting the drug federally approved for treatment and publicly available will be long. Catherine Neal Harris, a fellow at Rice University's Drug Policy Research Institute, said, I would say 10 years, really. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but the drug development process takes a very long time, Harris said. The latest publicly released figure from the FDA, dating back to the 2015, puts the average time to study a new drug and bring it to the market 8.5 years. Other groups, like the Nationwide Children's Hospital, say the timeline is now closer to the decade mark, and that's just average. The approval process of an experimental psychedelic, especially one potentially posing cardiac risk for users, could take even longer. Barring any new developments, researchers at state institutions will launch that process without a private industry partner. SB 2308 requires an approved drug company to have physical corporate presence in Texas, disclose key financial information, and agree to the state collecting 20% of the future revenue, along with the $50 million match. The requirements may have been a tough pill to swallow, Harris said. I would like to see what the companies were considered for this process and why specifically they were denied, Harris said, because I think it's helpful to understand if the state's bar is too high or if there's a lack of interest with these requirements. How many companies are even capable of meeting with these requirements? The Tuesday joint statement did not contain information on the companies involved. Rather, Patrick simply wrote that no drug company included in the most recent applicant has yet submitted a proposal that meets the law's requirements and standards to receive state funds and begin clinical trial. Harris said the state could look to donors and other private sources to help match the state's $50 million contribution, and the state needs a matching partner to disperse its own funds under the adopted text SB 2306, Harris said. They're supposed to have that private matching contribution of $50 million to move forward. As a statutory thing, something is going to have to change for the compliance to be there. She said that if needed, lawmakers could attend the bill's language in a special session. Burroughs and Paxton's joint statement did not specify a timeline for launching the trials. But even then, she said $100 million total may not be enough to totally fund the trials. There's questions about how this is going to work. $50 million would not be enough to get the clinical trials to approval stage, Harris said. I don't know that $100 million will be. So money is going to be needed, and maybe there are already identified private donors, right? So maybe they don't have a drug developer partner, but maybe they can help. But they're still attending to raise money from the private sector. Legislators in other states have joined Texas in advancing bills to fund research. On March 30th, Mississippi Governor Tate signed a bill authorizing the state's own Abigan Consortium and allowing for collaborations with other states' research programs. Lawmakers in Oklahoma and West Virginia have also filed bills modeled after SB 2308.
Yeah. The would-be miracle drug is still years away from approval for use. However, and a rubber stamp from the FDA is far from guaranteed, said Harris, who pointed to the agency's decision to deny MDMA for therapeutic use after decades of trials in 2024. And it remains to be seen whether Texas officials will have the stomach for a year-long process with uncertain outcome. Without the private partner, I don't know that they actually have the appetite to spend what needs to be spent on this, Harris said. Because again, I think 100 million is a kind of low ball for what it would take to get FDA approval process. They want to spend 50 million. So yeah, they might fall short on that research goal because it's not cheap, as we've seen in other articles about research and how much it cost. And right, like they spend billions, like not even millions. They spend billions on these research trials. So it'll be interesting to see if they get it off the ground and keep it off the ground.
So the number one problem that probably happened is, why the hell would I want to share you, a stranger who has friends in other medicine companies that may be able to reproduce the same thing that I'm reproducing and take me out of the equation? You know, like I don't know. They want 20%. They want all the information. They want all the data, everything, access to everything.
Yeah.
And so private companies allowing, I don't know, man, it's a stance, because when do you allow government to come in and tell you how to do your business and, show them it's, I don't know. And it's a private company.
Yeah, I would think that they would get a share in whatever's developed later on if they invest. But again, no guarantees. We saw them research MDMA for like how many years, and then the FDA said, "Nah, not doing it." Even though they proved it was safe, they proved it was effective, and they spent billions of dollars researching it.
Billions, not 100 million.
Yeah.
Huh. So now let's jump to Missouri. Fox2now.com. Missouri would allow psychedelic therapy trials for veterans, lawyers Simon.
Yeah, a Missouri bill that would permit FDA approved clinical trials for psychedelic therapies is moving to the state Senate. The legislation aims to provide new treatment options for veterans and first responders. The measure cleared by the Missouri House of Representatives this week with bipartisan support. A Missouri Veterans Report found that 171 Missouri veterans died by suicide in 2022, a rate 23% higher than the national average. Navy veteran Trey Warren is among those advocating for the bill. Warren served 4 combat deployments and flew F-14s and F-18 aircraft off aircraft carriers during 192 combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, graduating from Top Gun, Warren said. And I was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress, treatment-resistant anxiety and depression and alcohol use disorder. I also have a TBI in 2002, so a traumatic brain injury. Warren said traditional treatments provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs were not effective for his condition. He turned to psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy after experiencing suicidal thoughts while using traditional medications. I tried using the pills and, talking to a therapist at the VA, and it just didn't work, Warren said. And the first time I was suicidal was during that. And I also came off the medicine, and my therapist during the second time I was suicidal mentioned psychedelics. And so that's when I got into the world of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Dina Ladd is the founder of Modern Health Coalition. Her organization focuses on promoting research and finding therapists for veterans and law enforcement officers. Our mission is to promote legislation and policy with promoting psychedelic research, clinical trials, supporting the legislation so that we can get those trials and find therapies for veterans and law enforcement, Ladd said. The proposed clinical trials would be conducted by research organizations within Missouri. Warren described the therapy as a highly regulated process that includes professional supervision. Before you go through a screening beforehand, you meet the therapist beforehand during the actual medicine journey, Warren said. So it's very controlled and very safe. And for me, it was a lifesaver.
Missouri is not the first state to explore these treatments. Oregon, Colorado, and Texas have already taken steps to study or regulate psychedelic therapies. The Missouri Senate is scheduled to reconvene Tuesday. As of now, a date for a committee hearing on the bill has not been posted. All of the facts in this report were gathered by journalists employed by KTVI. Artificial intelligence tools were used to format information into a news article for our website. This creator was edited and fact-checked by KTVI staff before being published. Now they're doing news with AI. Isn't that so? Now he doesn't even have to write a paper.
Right.
Okay, so into our third article. BrainSciPost.org. Wait, let's look at the time. Oh, plenty of time. SciPost.org. Brain scan reveals how a woman voluntarily enters a psychedelic-like trance without drugs by Vladimir Hedrick.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. A neuroimaging study investigated the brain activity of an individual capable of voluntarily entering a transcendental visionary state, a rare, non-ordinary state of consciousness. The researchers found that the participants' brain connectivity fundamentally reorganized during this state. Her visual and somatosensory connections decreased, while connectivity in the frontal parietal control region of the brain increased. The paper was published in Neuroimage. Non-ordinary states of consciousness refer to mental states that differ significantly from normal waking awareness in terms of perception, cognition, emotion, and a sense of self. These states can rise through various means, including mediation, sensory deprivation, extreme stress, sleep, or the use of psychoactive substances like psychedelics. They typically involve alterations in time perception, intensified imagery, and reduced sense of boundary between the self and the environment. Some non-ordinary states are considered pathological, while others are culturally valued or deliberately cultivated for spiritual purposes. One specific type of non-ordinary state of consciousness is the transcendental visionary state. This state is characterized by vivid, often symbolic or archetypal imagery and a strong sense of insight or revelation. Individuals in such states frequently report experiencing a reality that feels more meaningful or truer than ordinary perception. These experiences may include visions of entities, landscapes, or abstract patterns, often accompanied by intense emotions such as awe or unity. In many religious or mystical traditions, transcendental visionary states are interpreted as encounters with a higher reality or divine presence. Studying these states significantly or scientifically has historically been challenging. Psychedelics or anesthesia can induce altered states, but they chemically alter the brain, making it difficult to isolate the pure mechanics of the experience from the drug itself. Furthermore, drug-induced states are often chaotic and unpredictable. Study author Gabriel Della Bella, that's a neat last name, and his colleagues conducted a case study to bypass these limitations. They used functional magnetic resonance imaging to examine the brain activity of self-taught participant capable of intentionally entering a transcendental visionary state on command without drugs. This person was able to reliably reproduce this state across multiple scanning sessions, reporting features akin to those found in psychedelic, hypnotic, and trance states, such as visual imagery, altered embodiment, shifts in time perception, and ego attenuation.
Yeah, the study participant is a 37-year-old woman who is also listed as one of the authors of the study due to her extensive introspective reporting. She described experiencing vivid internal imagery, alteration of her body, changes in agency, and a deep sense of unity. Crucially, she retained a high degree of voluntary control and temporal stability during the self-induced trance. In AVP, the participant, this trajectory of self-inducing the transcendental visionary state unfolds spontaneously and reproducibly across sessions. It begins with intricate geometric and luminous imagery and culminates in an expansive state of unity and serenity. At the time of data collection, she was not involved in the study design, hypothesis formulation, data analysis, or interpretation. She was blinded to the specific aims in the study and participated solely as a volunteer. The study authors explain. The participant never received formal training in techniques for inducing non-ordinary states of consciousness. Her practice developed intuitively and independently from early adolescence. At age 24, she experienced a spontaneous visual phenomenon that she later learned to reproduce voluntarily. Over time, she gradually refined this ability through the reasoning and introspection. She also reports stable, lifelong associations between the letters, numbers, and colors consistent with mid-graphene color synesthesia. For the study, AVP was interviewed multiple times for microphenomenological methods and completed 20 MRI sessions over a period of 5 months to ensure the observed brain changes were unique to the trance state. The researchers also scanned a control group of 10 matched women who were simply instructed to close their eyes and imagine vivid visual scenes. The results showed a clear, repeatable trajectory. At the beginning of each session, at the baseline phase, the participants enter the scanner in ordinary mental mode, engaging in everyday thoughts. She then intentionally relaxed, scanning her body, loosening her muscles, and allowing herself to feel progressively lighter. This was followed by a transition phase that was effortful, unstable, and required active attention. Yes.
Yeah, during the transition, she reported the emergence of a violet coloration replacing her dark visual field, followed by a gradual appearance of yellow-violet hexagonal lattice that she perceived as a structured pattern floating in the air around her. The emphasis on distinct sense of double consciousness. She was fully aware of being in the MRI scanner, but also felt connected to a broader field of experience characterized by serenity, unity, and a reduced fragmentation of time. After crossing the threshold into the fully developed transcendental visionary state, her experience stabilized. She reported profound calmness, spatial expansion, and attenuated bodily boundaries. She described an external presence, a continuous temporary flow of minimal segmentation, the hexagonal network coupled with the rhythmic violet pulses remained the most stable phenomenological motif across all 20 sessions. The neuroimaging data mirrored these subjective reports. During the transitional phase, brain connectivity became highly variable, indicating a temporary destabilization of her normal network organization. Once she entered the transcendental visionary state, overall connectivity between distinct brain networks decreased broadly. Her visual cortex showed severely reduced coupling with the auditory sensor motor orbitofrontal thalamic and cerebral regions, effectively isolating her visual process from the outside world and allowing internal imagery to dominate. Similarly, her somatomotor dorsal brain network disengaged from auditory and language cortices, matching her reports of losing the sensation of her physical body. However, while sensory networks disconnected, her frontal parental and salience networks often govern internal focus, cognitive control, and interoception showed increased coupling with the precuneus posterior cingulate and the multimodal temporal cortex. This aligns with subjective reports of sustained inward-directed attention, stable absorption, and remaining fully lucid and in control. Furthermore, her brain activity during the trance shifted towards lower entropy, less random noise, and higher statistical complexity, highly structured, rich patterns before returning to a baseline level once the session ended. None of these profound network reorganizations were observed in the control group, who simply imagined visual scenes. This study demonstrates how a self-induced NOC, non-ordinary state of consciousness, can be characterized as a coherent yet reorganized mode of conscious experience with reproducible large-scale signatures tightly aligned with a phenomenological sequence, the study authors concluded. The study provides an extremely valuable contribution to the understanding of non-ordinary states of consciousness, proving that human brain can radically reorganize its large-scale networks to create a deeply altered psychedelic-like reality without any pharmacological interventions. However, this was an in-depth case study involving only a single participant with a highly unique neurocognitive profile, including her synesthesia. While this is justified by the fact that individuals are able to voluntarily enter non-ordinary states of consciousness on command are extremely rare. Further studies involving diverse participants are needed to determine which of the observed changes in the brain activity are a general feature of such state and which are specific to this one individual. And then there's all the credits, and you can click that link there if you want to follow that case study.
So I'm glad Bufos put this in there, and the reason being is now they can compare the imagery with a state altered thing. So when they can look at different harm or non-harm that the psychedelic drug or compound could be doing to the brain and later dates down the road. Two, they can prove that although you can reach a state, the chemical will force you into that altered state of it. And if it could reach that form, it has the basis of clarity in the brain of what they're going for.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, I mean, we do know a lot about the brain. Lots of research has been done on people's brains, but they're still learning new things about our brains all the time and how our brains operate. So it's kind of neat that there were no medications used in this, but yet they were able to enter that state, which again is a rare phenomenon, but it's not unheard of. Someone has been able to do it, so it can be done. And how they've trained their brain to do that, I don't know, but it would be interesting to see a larger scale study of these same types of people who are able to do this to see if the outcome is essentially the same, which would again shed more light on what our brains do when we go into these states.
Oh, I agree. Well, hey, guess what? It's medication time.
That's right, folks. It's time to pay some bills. So stay tuned for a word from some of our amazing sponsors, and then we'll return with more articles Bufa has chosen making mainstream media news.
Back in 4 minutes and 20 seconds here on Psychedelic Reporters on NOK Network.
Dirty Dave, award-winning cultivator for over 4 decades. Dirty Dave, prized genetics fueled by advanced nutrients, original OG organics. Dirty Dave, award-winning products available at these fine establishments. Ask your shop to carry Dirty Dave. Contact us at dirtiesdoggies@gmail.com.
health. Established in 2013, Northern Ontario Cannabis Education and Resources is here for you. NOSER Director Kim Cooper brings you 45 plus years experience utilizing cannabis as a medicine, and she is spreading that education across the North. Don't be a jackass. Say no, sir, to propaganda with NOSER. Find them at www.nocer.ca.
Hey, hi, my name is John Mark, aka Sublimator Warrior, and I would like to welcome you to Smoke Signal in Tyndinaga.
One dab make your whole dome drip sweat. One dab make the homies all dip set. One dab, only really need one dab. One dab.
Smoke Signal is a medical dispensary where you can get all your products and needs.
Start vaping a whole bunch. Might just start laying up the blunts. God. Ooey, ooey, gooey, that's a sticky dab. Sticky dab. Might just have to put this one on Instagram. Go and hold it in, feel it in your ribs.
So come and check us out in Tyndinaga. 55 Highway 49 in Tyndinaga. It's on the res, and we're open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week.
Hey, dudes and dudettes. Enjoy the show, man.
And we're back from our medication session live here on Psychedelic Reporters on NOK Network.
And we have another session come from a Rebel Psychedelic Medicine. So let's get at it. I've been smoking sativa, and it's going with this cough. It's making me go really fast when I'm talking, and it's really interesting. So our next article comes from lucidnews.com. Federal support for U.S. psychedelic research accelerates 5-MeO-DMT clinical trials. By Josh Kassoff.
Okay, so during the last few weeks of 2025, President Trump officially signed a major executive order rescheduling cannabis as Schedule III substance under U.S. federal law. This sweeping reform finally allows for cannabis and its potential medical applications to be more comprehensively studied through clinical trials. Trump's rescheduling of marijuana may kick off a red letter year for not just medical cannabis reform and research, but also for more extensive research into psychedelic compounds with medical potential. In previous years, local municipalities across the U.S. have decriminalized psilocybin, and progressive states such as Oregon have authorized psilocybin for therapeutic use. Several other states are moving towards or have already filed legislation to reschedule or start psilocybin therapy pilot programs and clinics. Within the first few days of 2026, another significant reform occurred when the U.S. Food and Drug Administration lifted the 2-year clinical hold on investigational new drug application for potential inhalable medicine produced from 5-MeO-DMT. Made by the Dublin-based GH Research, their DMT-based formulation, GH001, is being investigated as a possible treatment for a condition known as treatment-resistant depression. Even prior to the groundbreaking decision by the FDA, GH001 had already seemed promising from a research standpoint. In a phase 2B clinical trial that started in 2023, structured as a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled investigation, GH001 demonstrated at a negative 15.5 point reduction on the Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale compared to placebo on day 8. With a 57.5% of patients in remission, according to findings. Similar to Trump's executive order on cannabis, the lifting of the clinical hold on GH001 is monumental and may create ripple effect that stretches beyond just another form or application being approved by the FDA. The progression of The GH001 clinical trial represents an important step forward for psychedelic-assisted medicine, particularly for conditions like depression, where conventional approaches sometimes fall short, explained Kim Ansroth, founder of Ally Consulting, a cannabis and psychedelic-based consulting firm in Oregon. That's pretty cool.
It is. Okay. Expansion of clinical trial rests on bipartisan initiative. Together with the other compliance advisors observing these shifts, Ansroth says the clinical trials that are now permitted are vital for gathering information about the potential medical efficacy of GH001 and possibly other 5-MeO DMT-based substances. This kind of controlled research gives regulators, clinicians, and patients credible data to evaluate safety and efficacy, says Ansroth. If supported by the further evidence, trials could help to normalize psychedelics as legitimate therapeutic options rather than just fringe experience. Seeing the FDA lift clinical holds to allow advanced trials like GH001 demonstrates how psychedelic research is finally being upgraded to conventional regulatory pathways. It shows the need for companies for the space to invest early in compliance with the quality system and its documentation. This free key foundation that supports the drug development programs and other regulated industries as federal movement towards expanded research in psychedelic assisted therapy gains momentum. Embrace of this legislation continues to be a rare bipartisan effort. 3 years ago, Texas Representative Dan Crenshaw filed the Douglas Mike Day Psychedelic Therapy to Save Life Act of 2023, which would have required the Department of Defense DoD to award grants eligible entities to research the treatment of certain members of the armed forces through the use of specified psychedelic substances. Specifically, the research would have been focused on active duty soldiers who have been diagnosed with either PTSD, with some type of traumatic brain injury, named after one of the Crenshaw's fellow Navy SEALs who tragically took his own life. The bill was geared towards veteran health. While the proposed legislation was ultimately unsuccessful, H3684 had many bipartisan co-sponsors that disagreed with Crenshaw with many other issues, most notably Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Those who allow U.S. politics understand the strength of a bipartisan initiative. When Representative Crenshaw and AOC joined to co-sponsor a bill. Since 2023, many more bills attempted amendments to support research in the psychedelic therapies have been filed with the allotted funding of the clinical trials, and several more geared towards veterans. Interestingly, some of the proposed legislation was filed by two of the Crenshaws, fellow retired Navy SEALs in the battlefield, the U.S. Congress Reps Morgan Luttrell, Republican, Texas, and Derek Van Orden, Republican, Wisconsin. Wow.
Yeah. In 2024, Van Orden authored H.R. 7347, which would require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to create and provide reports on whether psychedelic drug treatments will be included in the VA's formulary after receiving FDA approval. In 2025, Luttrell joined many other veterans who currently serve on both sides of the congressional aisle and co-sponsored H.R. 2623, which would have designated the VA to construct at least 5 facilities which would focus on meticulously researching and possibly administering certain psychedelic therapies. The approval for clinical trial or clinical research into GH001 will further propel ongoing research into the potential therapeutic benefit of 5-MeO DMT, a combined research initiative by pharmaceutical companies Atai Life Sciences and Beckley Pfizer, also known as Atai-Beckley, received a breakthrough therapy designation by the FDA on their own intranasal 5-MeO DMT benzoate for treatment-resistant depression back in October. With this designation, development and research of BPL-003, an intranasal spray containing 5-MeO DMT, can be expedited. This breakthrough therapy designation follows a phase 2b core blinded study, which demonstrated that a single administration of 8 milligrams or 12 milligrams of BPL-003 led to clinically meaningful and statistically significant reductions in depression symptoms within 24 hours, with effects sustained through the 8-week trial period, according to the findings. Moreover, the research found that study subjects were ready to be discharged at the 90-minute post-dose assessment period, meaning that BPL-003 could be administered over ideally a 2-hour therapy session. Cosmo Fielding Mellon, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Beckley PsychTech, said that Atai-Beckley in the Atai-Beckley press release that receiving breakthrough therapy designation is a significant milestone, which highlights the potential of BPL-003 to address the urgent unmet need of patients whose depression has not been helped by existing therapies. We believe the breakthrough therapy designation supports the strength of our clinical data, and importantly, it will help to ensure the pivotal phase 3 clinical program will be expedited and efficient as possible, guided by the FDA. The FDA approved clinical trials investigating potential new therapies based on 5-MeO DMT by 2 different companies is a significant step forward. 2026 could be a monumental year for the investigation of psychedelic-assisted therapies and their potential for treatment that surpasses current medications. The potential for compounds like Ep201 to help people with depression is one of the most compelling reasons to support evidence-based psychedelic research, said Azrot. What we are seeing with this study may show an upcoming broader shift in psychiatric medicine, and not just promising signals from small studies, but clinical framework that can carry these therapies through regulation and then to patients that need it the most. These treatments could become the next generation of effective care with the potential to save more lives. And I couldn't agree more.
Interesting story. And I like that. I like it. It's pretty neat. I always just fancied the feelings that 5-MeO DMT made us feel.
Yes, our own network director, Kim, can tell you all about it. She's been there, she's done that, and she absolutely benefited from it. So, and that wasn't done in a clinical setting. That was done in my bedroom by a facilitator. Anyways, I'm sure she'll tell her story again one day.
Nice. So our next article, psypost.org. Can a psychedelic journey change what you value most? And this is written by Katrina Petrova.
Yeah, a single dose of psilocybin can lead to lasting shifts in a person's life values, such as an increased appreciation for life or greater acceptance. These lasting changes appear to be driven by specific acute effects of the drug, particularly feelings of profound unity and euphoria. The findings were recently published in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. Psilocybin is the active chemical found in certain species of mushrooms. It's a classic psychedelic drug that temporarily alters human perception and mood. The chemical works largely by binding to specific serotonin receptors in the brain. Serotonin is a chemical messenger involved in many neural functions, including mood regulation. Researchers have conducted early clinical trials to test whether this chemical can help treat mental health conditions. Some trials have explored its use for major depressive disorder, anxiety associated with advanced cancer, and alcohol use disorder. Early trials results indicate the drug might facilitate changes in belief and subjective well-being. These outcomes have sparked renewed interest in psychedelic therapies. Researchers suspect that these positive psychological shifts rely heavily on the quality of the person's initial experience while under the influence of the drug. People who report feelings of spiritual connection or sense of ego dissolution often show the greatest long-term psychological changes. Ego dissolution refers to a temporary loss of one's self and a feeling of deep connection with the surrounding world. This temporary state may create opportunities for emotional healing. Understanding these value shifts is important for the treatment of severe mood disorders. People suffering from depression often lose their sense of purpose and struggle with low self-worth. If a medical intervention can consistently boost self-acceptance and life appreciation, it could act as a potential therapeutic tool. Clinicians need to understand exactly how these drugs provoke such changes.
Jessica Gaffney, scientists at King's College London, led a team to investigate how different doses of the drug affect healthy volunteers. Co-authors include James Rucker and a team of clinical researchers from the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience in London. They wanted to see if the drug changed core personality traits, psychological symptoms, and personal values. They also sought to understand if certain features of the acute psychedelic state could explain the observed changes. The academic team conducted a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. They recruited 89 healthy adult participants who had no current or past psychiatric disorders. Each participant was assigned to receive either 25 milligrams of psilocybin, 10 milligrams of psilocybin, or an active placebo. The study drug was given in identical capsules to prevent participants from knowing which dose they received. Participants took the capsules in a controlled, supervised clinical setting, and trained therapists and a chaperone monitored each person for several hours while the drug took effect. The therapeutic team was available to provide emotional support and discuss the experience afterward. Once the immediate effects wore off, the participants were allowed to return home. The research team evaluated the volunteers at regular intervals, checking day at 8 and day 85 after the dosing session. They used standardized questionnaires to measure changes in 5 commonly personality traits, such as extroversion, openness, and they also looked for changes in the common psychiatric symptoms, including anxiety and obsessive thinking. To assess shifts in personal values, the team utilized a specialized survey originally designed to measure life changes after near-death experiences. This questionnaire evaluates self-acceptance, questions for others, appreciation for life, and spiritual focus. The researchers also measured the participants' immediate psychedelic experience using a separate survey given shortly after the drug's effects subsided. The study results revealed that the psilocybin did not alter basic personality traits or psychiatric symptoms in this specific group. The lack of change in psychological symptoms was anticipated, as the volunteers were healthy individuals without psychiatric diagnoses, such as personality traits, are generally stable over a lifespan, making them difficult to alter with a single experimental intervention. The outcomes match these expectations. The researchers did observe distinct shifts in personal values among those who received after either dose of the the active drug compared to the placebo group. Participants reported an increased appreciation for life, either levels of self-acceptance. They also demonstrated a stronger quest for meaning and an elevated concern for others. These shifts were absent in the control group. Oh, interesting.
I lost us. Where did you finish off?
These life value shifts.
Oh, okay. These life value shifts remain present at both 1 week and 12-week follow-up points. The volunteers in the 10 milligram group also reported a decreased focus on worldly achievements such as wealth or career success. Participants in the higher dose group showed an initial increase in their concern for social and planetary issues, though this did not persist until the final follow-up. By analyzing the survey data, the research team found that a specific facet of psychedelic experience governed these changes in values. The researchers referred to this state as oceanic boundlessness. This psychological term describes feelings of deep euphoria, spiritual awakening, and a sense of oneness with the universe. It is a hallmark of strong psychedelic reactions. The participants who experienced the highest degree of oceanic boundlessness were the ones who reported the greatest positive shift in their life values. The acute feeling of unity and spiritual insight acted as a bridge between the physical drug administration and the subjective changes in daily perspective. To a lesser degree, some participants who experienced auditory alterations while on the drug also showed short-term increases in social and planetary concerns. The researchers also tested participants' cognitive flexibility, which is the mental ability to switch seamlessly between thinking about two different concepts. Some earlier studies suggested that psychedelics improved this flexibility, allowing people to break out of rigid thought patterns. The team used a rule learning computer task to test the mental agility 1 week after the dosing session. The team found no statistical differences in cognitive flexibility between the psilocybin groups and the placebo groups. The healthy volunteers may have already possessed high cognitive flexibility before the experience began. This baseline could have prevented the researchers from detecting any additional improvement. The measure tool may also lack the sensitivity needed to capture subtle psychological shifts. The scientists noted several limitations in their experimental design. The use of an inactive placebo means the participants likely knew whether they had received a psychoactive drug or not. These subjective effects can lead to a phenomenon known as functional unblinding. When participants realize they received the drug, their expectations might influence how they answer follow-up surveys. Many of the volunteers in this trial also had prior experience with psychedelic substances in their personal lives. Their previous use may have shaped their experiences and their baseline personality traits. The participants in the study scored higher on personality trait of openness than the reading public average before the trial even started. This indicates a pre-existing bias towards novel experiences. The questionnaire used to measure personal values relied entirely on self-reporting. Participants had to think back and estimate how much their beliefs had changed since the dosing session in the clinic. This reliance on memory introduces the potential for recall bias, as people might unintentionally exaggerate their personal growth. Future studies could incorporate interviews with family members to verify these purported behavioral shifts. Future research will be needed to include larger groups of participants to verify these outcomes. The authors recommended using active placebo, such as a very low dose or a different psychoactive compound, to maintain the blinding process for future trials. Testing these life value changes in patient populations rather than healthy volunteers could reveal how these values shift aid in the psychological healing process. And that's so true. I mean, you know, we're trying to treat people with these conditions, but we're using perfectly healthy volunteers. How do you know if it works? Right? That's the whole goal. You need to take the sick people and bring them in and give them a dose and see if they get better. But you can't take healthy people and expect them to get better when there was nothing wrong with them to begin with. Oh, make it make sense. Make it make sense.
I liked it. It was a good article.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very good article. And that brings us to the end of the show. And thank you for joining us here on Psychedelic Reporters on NOK Network, and for tuning in to our video podcast on NOK Network's Rumble and YouTube pages, as well as our social media sites.
That's right, folks. We hope you've enjoyed your update today of mainstream media coverage of psychedelic news and medicine advancements from around the globe.
Many thanks to our sponsors, and to Kim Cooper that helps us present the stories on the screen, and to my joint hosts, Tara Simpson, and to Buffalo Berrios for choosing the stories, and to you, our listeners, for joining in each week on Psychedelic Reporters, or Psychedelic Tuesday. Let's hear from Dead Ringer again from Kirkland Lake on our way out. I'm looking at myself, reflections of my mind. It's just the kind of day to leave myself behind. So gently swaying through the fairyland of love. If you'll just come with me, you'll see the beauty of